that it takes work to build healthy relationships. They don't magically happen. They don't naturally happen. And one of the reasons is that they're opposed, not just by the busyness of our lives, but they're opposed spiritually. Jesus spoke to this in John 10:10, where he said, a thief, and that's his word for our enemy, Satan, comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Jesus says, I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance. And one of the reasons that this subject of relationships is so hard is that we have an enemy. His name is Satan, and he does not want us to live in healthy relationships. In fact, there are at least 4 ways our enemy attacks our efforts to connect. And if you have your handout today, I've labeled these all with a D to give you something to guess at as we go through this. What's the word going to be? The first word is deception. The first way our enemy attacks our effort to connect is that he seeks to deceive us. All the way back in the beginning, in Genesis chapter 3, we see this is the very first tactic our enemy uses. In Genesis 3:1, the text says, now the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? These bolded 4 words, did God really say, is a tactic that I know the enemy has used on me, and I'm 100% certain he's used on you. Did God really say that he forgave you? Because I think you should, beat yourself up for all your failures. Did God really say he called you to that? Because how on earth would God call somebody to that who is so unqualified? Did God really say that he wants you to walk in purity when everyone else says discard that as an old, antiquated idea? Did God really say you need to be in relationships? Because after all, aren't people so much hard work? And our enemy's first tactic is always to get us to question, did God really say that? But if deception doesn't work, he has plenty of other tricks in his bag. And he'll move from deception to distance. Deception to distance. We see this again in the very first chapter of sin entering the world, Genesis 3. What happens when Adam and Eve buy into, did God really say? Well, distance begins to be created between them as they cover themselves with fig leaves. They hide from one another, and ultimately they begin to hide from God. And that distance that was present in that very first marriage shows up in our marriages and our relationships today. That distance can be emotional, like shame, like loneliness, or it can be physical. For a lot of you who've moved to Prescott from somewhere else, you're experiencing distance from your people because the people with which you have the deepest relationship now live somewhere else. And it's great that they're your people, but when you get stuck with a problem, you can't always drive 6 or 8 hours to them or have them drive 6 or 8 hours to you. If the enemy can't get us with deception or distance, he'll move to distraction. We live in such a distracted world. Now, I think sometimes we think that our world is the most distracted world, and maybe, I haven't lived any other time. I don't have a time machine to go back and check. But I think people back when the newspapers were invented, kind of railed over coffee at the coffee shop about everybody who wasn't talking to themselves on the train. They're all reading the newspaper. Or those people are sitting around the radio distracting themselves. And the truth is, we've always been good at inventing distractions. Some distractions are hobbies, the things that we do for fun. Some distractions are technological, the tools that we use. And some distractions are good things like work that provide for our needs. But here's what a distraction is. A distraction is anything that is less important, which leaves no room for what is more important. And one of the things I hope you're discovering in this series is that relationships are those more important things. That they're like a retirement account. You don't think you need it until you need it. And if you haven't been investing in it when you didn't need it, it's not there when you need it. And all too often, we allow lesser things to take the place of more important things. And if our enemy can't get us for deception or distance or distraction, he'll go for the last one, which is discouragement. Which I think is where a lot of people end up. Maybe where you're at today, where you're like, Scott, I'm just discouraged. I've tried this stuff that you've been talking about, and frankly, it didn't happen. Or you know what? I've invested in relationships, and it just takes so long to get there. Or you know what? I invested in that where I used to live, but now that I'm somewhere new, I don't want to start over. So I'm just going to rely on those people that I have there. And you just get discouraged about even putting yourself out there again.